At the moment, we are in a state of universal interception.
I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. I did not take an oath to support and defend NSA.
Edward Snowden did something that was important and was a heroic act.
To call these people superheroes is not so good because it sets them up.
For some people, they are superheroes. For others, simply traitors. Whistleblowers like Daniel Ellsberg, Thomas Drake, William Binney, and Edward Snowden. Hackers and activists like the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and the former British Secret Service agent Annie Machon. They warn us about the complete surveillance of our society. They oppose intelligence agencies, governments, and corporations. And for this they are threatened, hounded, and imprisoned. Why are they so committed? What drives them? San Francisco, California, the cradle of our modern-day computer industry, home to creative technicians and visionaries, hackers and whistleblowers. In a suburb of San Francisco lives the godfather of all whistleblowers, Daniel Ellsberg.
I'm probably the only whistleblower that I know of who can make a living as a lecturer because I'm the one who was put on trial for 115 years. I'm the one who was involved in a president resigning because of his crimes against me. So he made me notorious enough that I can make a living as a lecturer.
Ellsberg studied economic science at Harvard in the 1950s. After graduating, he enrolled, like many fellow whistleblowers, in the military.
And you see courage there all around you of a conventional sort. High courage. You've been trained for it, you've been disciplined for it, but you see it. It happens, that the training works. And people are risking their bodies and their lives every minute.
At the end of the 1960s, Ellsberg worked at the U.S. Embassy in Vietnam. He became known by publishing the secret Pentagon Papers, which proved that the U.S. president had lied to the American public about the Vietnam War for years. Ellsberg decided to make the documents public after meeting peace activists who had refused the draft.
I would not have thought of doing it if I didn't have the example of many, many people who were going to prison for nonviolent resistance to the draft.
In 1969, Ellsberg began smuggling parts of the Pentagon Papers out of the government agency he worked for and copied them over the following months. A total of 7,000 pages of secret documents. In March 1971, he passed the documents to the New York Times, who eventually printed them. Ellsberg surrendered himself and was charged with theft and unauthorized possession of Pentagon material. The trial collapsed when it came to light that Nixon had illegally wiretapped Ellsberg. And agents had broken into his psychiatrist's office. Ellsberg thereafter remained a free man.
If they arrest me or indict me, then I will say it was only me. Patricia, who was standing next to me, did cooperate, it so happens. And I couldn't figure out why she wasn't indicted, my wife, because she had done a lot of copying, had her fingerprints all over the paper. And I thought it was because they didn't want such a beautiful woman sitting next to me at the defense table in front of the jury. I would advise people now not to do what I did to reveal themselves if they can avoid it. I revealed myself for the same reason Snowden did, essentially. We knew that other people would be suspected, maybe even charged, with circumstantial evidence against them. People who might look more guilty than you did. In a way, I would rather take the risks of democracy than the risks of dictatorship.
Mr. Daniel Ellsberg. We have a third panelist who will be joining us from Russia, one of my real heroes, and I think many people in this room, many people in the hacker community, many people in America. Edward Snowden, welcome.
More than 40 years after Daniel Ellsberg, NSA employee Edward Snowden emerges as a whistleblower. The USA now has a new public enemy #1.
Hi, guys. But thanks to Manning and now to you, I'm getting more favorable publicity than in 40 years. Because suddenly people who were all for putting me in prison for life before now realize that I was really a very good guy. I was the good whistleblower, and so I'm totally, of course, rejected this from the beginning. I didn't want to be a foil for showing up badly to people that I totally admired.
There was a moment at HopeX, the HopeX conference in July in New York City. Ellsberg was having a live conversation with Snowden.
We had a right, as Americans and as members of the global community, to know the broad outlines of government policies that have a significant impact on our lives. And I think that's something that Tom Drake showed me how to do the right way.
There was a moment where he said very clearly, very distinctly, that I showed him the right way. I had always hoped that a Snowden would come along.
Thomas Drake served during the Cold War in Europe in the 1980s with the U.S. Air Force, which included work as a signals analyst on spy planes, hoovering the Soviet Union.
So my day job is reconnaissance of another country, right? And then my hobby was computers. And you know, it was a fascinating world, and you're now communicating with people, particularly in Europe, very quickly. You have these bulletin boards, and I'm dialing into Chaos Computer Club. Yeah, I was a virtual member.
In the 1990s, Drake worked as a software developer for the CIA. In September 2001, he was hired as a senior analyst by the NSA.
My first day on the job was 9/11. We were working, 16, 18-hour days. I mean, it was those 4 months after 9/11 are a blur, because it was just we recognized that this was a significant event in history. Whatever you've got in the fight, whatever you've got in the labs, we need it. Whatever tools you can use to prosecute those behind 9/11, do it. I was selected as the designated senior executive at NSA to lead up that effort to find anything we had in the fight, and so I did. And that's where I brought to the attention of others tools, techniques, programs, things that were in the lab, things that were pilots, things that were being just test bed. The mantra that went out from NSA by General Hayden, he kept going around saying, we just need to make Americans feel safe again. Feel safe. Even had banners. And I discovered during those first 3 weeks after 9/11, all this information that, as you imagine, was pouring in after 9/11, literally being used to monitor and surveil and intercept U.S. domestic communications on an extraordinarily broad scale. I was finding this out within days of 9/11, and others were coming to me saying, "What are we doing, Tom?"
Among the Snowden documents were figures for the U.S. Secret Service budget. Since September 11th, they supposedly doubled by $25 billion to $52 billion in 2013.
The surveillance programs continue to metastasize. They continue to expand in ways that still have not been fully revealed. And this became sort of the collect it all mindset and mentality. What does that lead to? Well, yes, you're a secret organization. You have these other interesting arrangements with certain internet providers and telecommunication concerns. The temptations are enormous. And it's like, hey, you know, give us access or hack in or open it up. And that's what happened. I mean, and now you're seeing a lot of this unfold.
The National Security Agency, NSA for short, the largest foreign intelligence agency in the USA, has been responsible for the worldwide monitoring of electronic communications since 1952. Some of the 35,000 employees weren't comfortable with the massive expansion of surveillance since September 11th.
All of the colleagues that I knew, which was just a handful, Bill Binney, Ed Loomis, 𝗗𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗶𝘁, chose to retire from the NSA in late October 2001. They realized what was happening. They could not stand by and see the subversion of the Constitution and all the work that they had done being used for mass surveillance. They left the agency. I begged them to stay. I chose to remain and fight from within as long as I could.
I got mad at them. You know, so my objective was to counterattack. I don't believe in defense, you know, just sitting back and being defensive. I mean, you have to get out there and attack. So that's what I started doing. That was my point. It's time to attack. So basically it was a declaration of war. Me against my government.
William Binney, mathematician and programmer, initially worked for the NSA as an analyst, then later as the technical director of the Secret Service. As the boss of a 6,000-strong team, he developed a wiretap program that anonymously filtered and processed large volumes of data.
I tried to do the right thing right after 9/11, trying to make a contribution that would make a difference. They refused to accept it, so it was basically blocked. There was nothing I could do. They would accept nothing from me.
The NSA directors decided against the program from Binney's team and opted for another that collected much more data.
The problem is I helped in designing the system that's in use. Because I knew what was possible once they started using those programs and opening it up to massive data input on everybody in the planet. So it was pretty clear that it was obvious to me how they were using it and what they're doing with it. So, I mean, because I understood the design of the systems. And so after that, when they started spying on U.S. citizens violating the Constitution, I had to leave. I couldn't be a part of all the criminal activity that was going on. I mean, that's fundamentally, I call that treason against the country. So I got out at the end of October, Halloween Day 2001.
1 year later, Binney submitted a complaint to the U.S. Defense Department for wasting state funds. The complaint was examined but had no effect. The patriot, Bill Binney, became a combative whistleblower, a role model for many today.
The Sam Adams Associates for Integrity in Intelligence presents its Integrity Award for 2015 to William Binney. Bill Binney represents the patriotic side of a duel between two unequal adversaries. Like Tom Drake and Ed Snowden, he was determined to preserve his integrity, his privacy, and his personal honor.
as this year's Sam Adams Associates Integrity and Intelligence Award recipient. So thank you, Bill.
I knew every major leader in NSA. I know General Hayden personally, and I have to say that I have met more people with true integrity and character since I've left NSA.
While Binney opted out of the system, his colleague Thomas Drake fought against the violation of civil rights from within the NSA.
I knew from the moment I stood up to my own supervisor and I went to her and said, what are we doing? Violating the prime directive. You cannot spy on Americans without a warrant. You don't understand. I confronted my boss. I go to the Office of General Counsel, I confront him. And then he says, don't ask any more questions. Now you're faced with a dilemma. I didn't give the order. I'm not the one that was implementing the mass surveillance program, the digital dragnet. What do? I chose to blow the whistle. But how do you do that, knowing there's a mass surveillance program and knowing that NSA was targeting journalists? I made arrangements in encrypted form to communicate anonymously with this reporter. Then I made a decision that I would meet the reporter. That was in February of 2007.
The journalist subsequently published a number of articles about the waste and mismanagement in the NSA. The repercussions were enormous, but the NSA let the attacks come to nothing, as Drake did not prove the central part of his criticism with documents. This tactic suddenly stopped working in 2013.
Edward Snowden's material, the stuff he took out, made it absolutely impossible for them to deny what they were doing because it simply laid out in their terms, on their slides, what they were doing, and it was impossible for them to deny it.
No, I don't think Mr. Snowden was a patriot. The way in which these disclosures happened have been damaging to the United States and damaging to our intelligence capabilities.
People ask, as I used to be, is he patriot or traitor? You know, that's the headline and all these things. Edward Snowden, patriot, traitor. That drives me nuts, the very thought, you know, that people could regard you as a traitor.
We will likely face is the cost in human lives on tomorrow's battlefield or in some place where we will put our military forces, you know, when we ask them to go into harm's way. And I think that's the greatest cost that we face with the disclosures that have been presented so far.
Snowden was the one person in NSA who did what he absolutely should have done. How many people should have done what you did? What Snowden is revealing is a global threat to the potential for democracy anywhere.
Being a patriot doesn't mean, you know, obedience to authority. Mm-hmm. Putting aside your obligations to your people, to your country, for the benefit of your government is the opposite of patriotism.
Until the revelations by Edward Snowden, the warnings of intelligence agency critics were always shrugged off as speculation. Only after he had published all the original NSA documents was there proof and concrete evidence provided for the first time.
Documents make all the difference. It is more risky to do that. It also makes all the difference in terms of political effect. Snowden, Manning, and I gave the documents.
Less than 1% of the Snowden documents have been published. And that's terrible. It's a terrible thing. Those documents do not belong to a journalist. They do not belong to Edward Snowden. Now, they do not belong to the National Security Agency. They belong to history. They are part of something that humanity has gone through. Every single one of us has been a victim of National Security Agency spying. All human beings who use the internet are victims of it, and the victims deserve to know what has happened to them. I think the opportunity is in producing a very broad global outrage about what has happened in every country and informing all the victims of that surveillance about what has actually happened to them, and releasing enough documents so that all the technical industries and hackers and computer programmers and other governments can work out how to protect themselves.
Julian Assange, hacker and journalist, was interested in computer programming from an early age. As a teenager, he had already hacked into foreign data systems and military networks. Later, he studied physics and mathematics in Melbourne. In 2006, he founded the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, which publishes secret documents of governments, intelligence agencies, and corporations.
Daniel Ellsberg was an insider, and Edward Snowden was an insider. I would say that I was never an insider. I was inside military and intelligence and big companies as a computer hacker, and later as an analyst analysing their material. So I had a sort of keen sense for what they were about, but I never had the view that one should work for these organisations. For people who were in the US national security system, it was like they were on a drug that made them powerful because they were in a group that had a lot of power. And that system has a way of talking about how the world works and how the United States empire is a good thing. And it can take a long time to wash that drug out of the system. Daniel Ellsberg has nearly entirely washed that out of his system. But the more recent whistleblowers, they still have perhaps some way to go.
The only difference I have from Assange is, I think, I think that he probably believes more in the value of total or near total transparency than I do.
On WikiLeaks, highly explosive documents can still be published anonymously that otherwise would be withheld through non-disclosure or censorship. According to WikiLeaks, all documents are checked for authenticity. One major aim is to force corporations and intelligence agencies to abide to more transparency and social responsibility, to shed light on their well-kept secrets, which cover up illegal and immoral behavior.
Mein erster Gedanke, als ich von den Veröffentlichungen durch Assange erfahren habe, war, dass damit mit Sicherheit enorme Gefahren für US-amerikanische Soldaten in Afghanistan, vielleicht auch außerhalb Afghanistans eintreten.
There's just this rhetorical counterattack, which is like something out of kindergarten, which is to say, no, you do that. And unfortunately, the US press is so sort of servile that it reprints this nonsense. So WikiLeaks reveals very concretely, extremely accurate documentation how the US's own records show that it was involved in one way or another in the deaths of more than 120,000 people in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2004 and 2010. And the US government's response is, maybe hypothetically, as a result of this release of this material, some Afghan family or US soldier could face risks.
That's the standard accusation. Or like what Tom Drake did, threaten military lives. Well, exposing corruption, fraud, waste, and abuse doesn't threaten military lives. Continuing them threatens military lives.
Now, the end result is that they were forced to admit last year under oath that a single person had been harmed as a result of our publications, not one.
Assange demands the protection of individual privacy on the one hand, and on the other, radical transparency of governments and corporations. But what are the motives of whistleblowers? Why do intelligence insiders step forward into the light, risking their careers, their lives, to expose the wrongdoings of those in power? Is there a common aim, a collective mission of this broad alliance and wild mix of patriotic ex-Secret Service agents, anarchic hackers, cyberpunks, and intellectual publicists?
The common theme among all of us is that we support human rights and that we support the public's right to know information, especially when it threatens the public or threatens the democracy or freedom of individuals. I mean, that's the kind of common theme that goes through all of it, I think.
But it's a lonely act that you commit as one person. But I was convicted by the truth of what I knew. So I made a conscious choice to, yes, violate a non-disclosure agreement.
We also took the oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So that means even our government, if it's violating the Constitution. So we have the responsibility to stand up against that.
It's the moral agency. You're confronted by activity that demands a response. And you're in a place where you have access to information. You have access, you're eyewitness. You're essentially eyewitness, or you're brought into awareness.
Das ist, glaube ich, von Fall zu Fall verschieden, aus welcher Motivation heraus Whistleblowing passiert. Und ich bin auch der Meinung, dass das gar nicht so wahnsinnig relevant ist, aus welcher Motivation das heraus passiert. Also wenn ein Mitarbeiter bei der Lufthansa, um mal einfach ein Beispiel zu nennen, bei der Lufthansa wütend auf seinen Boss ist und dann anzeigt, dass falsche Ersatzteile im Flugzeug verwendet werden, dann ist mir egal, ob der sauer auf seinen Boss ist oder nicht, sondern der Fakt, dass da sozusagen die Sicherheit von Menschen gefährdet ist, wissentlich, reicht mir, um zu sagen, das ist ein Whistleblowing-Vorgang. Wir wissen aber auch aus Erfahrung, gerade mit den High-Profile-Leaks wie von Manning oder von Snowden, dass da tatsächlich eine Überzeugung dahinter steht. Also in dem Umfang macht es keiner, ohne zu sagen, es ist absolut notwendig. Schon allein aus dem Risiko heraus, das damit verbunden ist.
To call these people superheroes is not so good because it sets them up on a pedestal and say, well, they did it, I admire that, but they're not me. I'm not a superhero. Who thinks of themselves as a superhero? Only nuts, or 16-year-olds dream of it, So that's your excuse for not doing it. It doesn't take a superhero. And these people, none of these people would have been identified as superheroes.
Man kann die Frage, ob Edward Snowden Held ist, nicht mit Ja oder Nein beantworten. Aus meiner Sicht ist er mit Sicherheit jemand, dem man dankbar sein muss dafür, dass er Machenschaften ans Tageslicht gebracht hat, die ohne seinen Veröffentlichungsakt mit Sicherheit heute noch unbekannt wären oder mit großer Wahrscheinlichkeit heute noch unbekannt wären. Auf der anderen Seite muss man mit Sicherheit auch Verständnis haben für die Position der US-Amerikaner, insbesondere der US-Administration, aber auch der US-Sicherheitsbehörden, die natürlich Edward Snowden unter einem anderen Licht sehen, die ihn als Verräter sehen, die ihn als jemanden sehen, der Dienstgeheimnisse ausgeplaudert hat. Also ich glaube, man muss Edward Snowden letzten Endes ambivalent sehen.
Jemand wie Snowden oder selbst jemand wie Julian, es besteht theoretisch die Möglichkeit, in Amerika mit der Todesstrafe bestraft zu werden, nach dem sogenannten Espionage Act von 1917. Das ist natürlich schon eine heftige Konsequenz. Und wenn es besser läuft, dann gehst du halt nur für 35 Jahre in den Knast. Ich weiß nicht, ob das wirklich besser ist, aber das ist sozusagen dann die Alternative. Ja? Und damit konfrontiert zu sein, das erfordert wirklich Überzeugung. Das machst du nicht einfach, weil dich dein Chef ärgert. Das machst du wirklich nur, wenn du meinst, du musst es tun.
Is democracy possible with the executive branch in each country, whether it's nominally democratic or not, knowing everything about the private lives of all of their citizens, their legislators, their journalists, their judges, and their ordinary people who can be turned into informants, with those people knowing almost nothing about the government being opaque and secretive, and the people being transparent?
You guys, this is the most ridiculous I've ever seen. You know, you're spying on everybody in the country and everybody in the world, and you're not even bothering to get a court order for it, a real court order instead of your secret court order.
If you don't have privacy in your communications, if you can't guarantee that you can hold a telephone conversation or write an email or view stuff from the internet or read books, once that is known to the authorities, and you begin to self-censor what you say and what you read.
Annie Machon is a former agent of the British National Intelligence Agency, MI5.
You begin to withdraw a little bit from your normal life because you're told you can't mention you're being recruited by MI5. And that means that people tend to focus much more on their life within MI5. So you begin to socialize a lot more with other people there because you can talk about stuff. And also you end up mainly in relationships with your fellow intelligence officers, which is how I met my former partner and colleague, David 𝗂𝗄𝗓.
When 𝗂𝗓 made the illegal practices of the intelligence service public, Annie Machon supported him in becoming a whistleblower. In 1997, shortly before the publication of the secret documents, the couple flew to France. They went underground for a year and subsequently lived in Paris for 2 years. In 2000, they returned to London. 𝗂𝗓 went to prison. Machon was spared. Since then, she fights for government accountability and campaigns for the rights of whistleblowers.
When David 𝗂𝗓 and I ended up going on the run after we'd blown the whistle on a series of crimes from MI5, we were very conscious of exactly how they could be targeting us and investigating us. So wherever we were, we thought, well, the telephone might be compromised, the computer might be compromised, there might be microphones in where we were living, there might be little video cameras recording what we did, and also people might be turned to report against us. So there are all these different techniques that they can use, and this was way back in the 90s, the analog era. So even at that point, when we were on the run from MI5 across Europe, we used the only surefire way that we knew to communicate to each other securely, which was to put a piece of glass or ceramic on a surface and put one sheet of paper on it, and then you cover it so that nothing can read what you're writing on the paper. You don't say anything, you just write what you want on the piece of paper, and then you allow the other person to read that message. So there's no audio, there can be no video, and there can be no imprint under that one piece of paper. Then, of course, you have to get rid of that piece of paper. So you have to burn it up, pulverize the ashes, and either cast it to the winds or tip the ashes down the loo. Because we know that our computers, our telephones, all of that can be compromised. The video can be switched on remotely, the audio can be switched on remotely, they can log what we write on the keyboards. They can even, and this comes from the Snowden disclosures, they can even use microwaves apparently to beam onto the screen and read what you're typing.
We live in a digital world where little remains unseen, turning privacy into another luxury good. Bleak science fiction visions of a powerful surveillance apparatus with seemingly endless technical possibilities now only seems a question of time. How does this change our behavior if every move we make, every word we say is recorded and analyzed? Which roles will we have to play, and who's writing the script?
Having lived with that sense of endemic surveillance, I can tell you it's corrosive to the human spirit. So once you lose that sense of privacy and you start to self-censor, you stop to be an effective and fully integrated citizen of that country. So privacy, in my view, is the last defense against a slide towards a police state or totalitarianism.
If you let go of your rights for a moment, you've lost them for a lifetime. And that's why this matters, is because it happened and we didn't know about it. We weren't told about it.
So if you say you have nothing to hide, so you have nothing to worry about, you have nothing to fear, and you'll hear all that language. Okay, fine. Turn. If you live in an apartment or house? Yes. Well, just give me your keys. Do you have a car or rent it, or car, whether you rent it or lease it? Yes. Give me your car keys. Do you use Google? Do you have a Gmail account? Do you have Facebook? Well, give me all your passwords. Do you have medical records? Turn those over to me too. Oh, by the way, all those bank accounts and telephone records? Yeah, just give them to me for safekeeping.
Can you have independent courts? Can you have an independent press? None of that. NSA now has the potential to know every source of every journalist of every story by following the emails, following the phones, following the people with their GPS, with their iPhones.
Ich lehne wirklich dieses Bild grundlegend ab, dass wir hier einer Massenüberwachung sämtlicher Bürger durch den Staat näher treten.
Mass surveillance in general is not about surveilling you. It's not about surveilling me. It's about surveilling us collectively. It's about watching the company that we keep for everybody in the country and on a global scale.
In harsh contrast to the recently emerged facts, great public outcry has not yet been heard.
Now, why don't people care? In the UK, it's a very easy answer. Partly it's cultural because we're still in love with James Bond. And our political leaders immediately came out in defense of the intelligence agencies, saying, we know what they do, they follow the law, everyone go back to sleep, don't worry. So the debate has been very muted in the UK. It wasn't, I think, in, as I said, USA, Brazil and Germany, but it's amazing how quickly people forget.
Und interessant ist ja aus meiner Sicht auch, dass auch wenn die Empörung zunächst mal insbesondere in Deutschland groß war, ich habe auch persönlich den Eindruck, in keinem Land auf unserem Globus war die Empörung so groß wie in Deutschland, dann haben doch die wenigsten Bürger unmittelbar ihr Nutzerverhalten geändert.
When it became known in autumn 2013 that the private cell phone of German Chancellor Angela Merkel was tapped by the NSA, the public outcry in Germany was initially large. Until then, the German-American friendship had been close, and Germany believed to be an equal partner of the United States.
Do friends spy on friends? Of course they do. Everybody does. I mean, we caught the Israelis spying on us several times. What did that do to our relationship? But not really anything, because we know everybody does that, okay? If you're a leader of a country in the world, you're a target. Everybody wants to know what you're thinking. So you are a target, friends and foes, right? Everybody's looking to see or trying to find out what you're thinking. Universally true. I mean, that's why diplomacy was started, right, back in thousands of years ago. So I mean, it's nothing new. Chancellor Merkel, when she found out her private phone was being tapped, I mean, she should have understood that from the beginning. I mean, and her security should have told her that from the beginning and given her some protection. Since all the leaders understood it, the fact that it's exposed, you have to object maybe publicly, but in reality, afterward, the relationship is too important to jeopardize just for a simple thing that you already knew was happening.
Also ich habe nicht den Eindruck, dass die Menschen desinteressiert oder indifferent mit diesen Fällen, also sowohl WikiLeaks wie jetzt die NSA-Affäre, umgehen, eher hilflos. Die Reaktion war so hasenfüßig, vielleicht auch aus guten Gründen, weil sie keine andere Möglichkeit sahen, dagegen vorzugehen, dass dann in der Bevölkerung natürlich auch eine gewisse Resignation sich breit macht.
The problem in relation to bulk surveillance is exactly the same as the problem with global warming. It's exactly the same. It's not that it will affect you right now individually. Why is global warming interested in you? And why is the NSA interested in you? Global warming affects everyone because it's a general change in things. Bulk surveillance affects everyone because it leads to a general change in the nature of civilization. Global warming is invisible. It's intangible. You only kind of glimpse, maybe today was a bit hotter. I don't know. Is that coincidence or not? Similarly, massive surveillance is invisible. It's conducted at these points that connect continents together or by the NSA sticking its fangs into Google. And these are extremely sophisticated and complex technologies that everyone except specialists does not understand. Specialists understand it and say to everyone else, my God, can't you see what's happening? Similarly, in relation to greenhouse gases, climate scientists understand it, saying, my God, can't you see what's happening? In the case of climate science, well, there's a counter lobby, which is the fossil fuel companies, and all those profiting from that. In the case of bulk surveillance, there's the surveillance industry and the intelligence agencies and so on, and all those who are sucking down that information and profit from it and form a lobby in the other direction. So very similar.
The fear of terrorist attacks makes the mass surveillance a necessary evil for many. The much quoted, "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear," often legitimizes the snooping of covert agencies. Yet many are unaware of the actual extent of the surveillance.
Basically a big data program which provides the raw data that can then be analyzed, it can be filtered, it can be subjected to rules, for example, like we've seen this case for, that says everything you do is being analyzed, it's being weighted, it's being measured.
But the intelligence services are not the only ones monitoring communications and processing massive data. Also, private corporations like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple collect millions of pieces of information about us to analyze and monetize.
Tatsächlich ist es ja auch so, dass man uns sagt, Daten, eure persönlichen Daten, sind der Rohstoff des 21. Jahrhunderts, ist das Öl der neuen Wirtschaft. Ja, das legt nahe, dass sie der Rohstoffträger sind und dass sie ausgebeutet werden müssen.
We don't really know what exactly happens with our own digital trails. Our data is transferred invisibly to huge data centers. sublimating into a complex new identity, creating our digital self. Smartphones capture our communication behavior. How long, when, where, and with whom we talk. The data we create, assembling our digital self, is also of interest as a juicy source of information for the intelligence community.
I would always call this a spy phone. And it's not just iPhones that are spy phones. I mean, most smartphones are these days.
They were tapping the fiber lines between the Google servers, yeah. They didn't even know this was going on. Google did not.
I had a lot of surveillance, and also GCHQ, as it later came out, was spying on us and the National Security Agency on me personally. So there was a risk when coming to the embassy to apply for asylum.
You've got to remember that inside the intelligence community, they're trumpeting these things. They're holding these guys up as examples to say, look, if you say what's going on, if you step out of line, even if you're doing it for the right reasons, even if you're doing it the right way, there will be repercussions.
Snowden was the one person in the NSA who did what he absolutely should have done.
Being a patriot doesn't mean, obedience to authority. Putting aside your obligations to your people, to your country, for the benefit of your government is the opposite of patriotism.
So WikiLeaks reveals very concretely, extremely accurate documentation, how the US's own records show that it was involved in one way or another in the deaths of more than 120,000 people in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2004 and 2010. And the US government's response is maybe hypothetically, as a result of this release of this material, some Afghan family or US soldier could face risks.
We will likely face is the cost in human lives on tomorrow's battlefield, or in some place where we will put our military forces.
Now the end result is that they were forced to admit last year under oath that a single person had been harmed as a result of our publications, not one.
If you let go of your rights for a moment, you've lost them for a lifetime. And that's why this matters, is because it happened and we didn't know about it. We weren't told about it.
For some people, they are superheroes. For others, simply traitors. Whistleblowers like Daniel Ellsberg, Thomas Drake, William Binney, and Edward Snowden. Hackers and activists like the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and the former British Secret Service agent Annie Machon. They warn us about the complete surveillance of our society. They oppose intelligence agencies, governments, and corporations. And for this they are threatened, hounded, and imprisoned. Why are they so committed? What drives them? The intelligence services are not the only ones monitoring communications and processing massive data. Also, private corporations like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple collect millions of pieces of information about us to analyze and monetize.
Tatsächlich ist es ja auch so, dass man uns sagt, Daten, eure persönlichen Daten, sind der Rohstoff des 21. Jahrhunderts, ist das Öl der neuen Wirtschaft. Ja, das legt nahe, dass sie der Rohstoffträger sind und dass sie ausgebeutet werden müssen.
We don't really know what exactly happens with our own digital trails. Our data is transferred invisibly to huge data centers, sublimating into a complex new identity, creating our digital self.
Die digitale Welt bringt es mit sich, dass es keine geheimen Ecken der Weltöffentlichkeit mehr gibt, sondern die Dinge werden transparenter. Die Zivilgesellschaften wollen mehr wissen, was stattfindet und wie Länder regiert werden. Wir freuen uns auf diese Herausforderung in Deutschland und wollen versuchen, nicht immer, wie so manchmal in der Diskussion, erst über die Risiken zu sprechen, sondern vor allen Dingen die Chancen zu sehen.
Everyone gets smarter because of this technology, because it's free or very inexpensive. And the empowerment of people is the secret to technological progress. We are all participating in this enormous transition where billions of people are joining our party, right? Joining our fun and joining our anxiety.
Wir müssen eine gute Mischung und eine gute Balance von individuellem Datenschutz, aber eben auch der Freiheit, aus Daten neue Produkte zu machen, gewinnen.
New developments in machine intelligence will make us far, far smarter as a result. And this means everyone on the planet. The genetics revolution has a huge and positive impact on the way we'll treat disease, progression of disease, and so forth and so on. And it's all basically because these smartphones are really supercomputers.
Wir erzeugen eine ganze Menge von Daten. Also jedes Telefonat, das wir führen, sogar im Grunde genommen, wenn wir nichts tun und einfach nur unser Smartphone in der Hosentasche haben, erzeugen wir Daten, denn über GPS weiß man immer, wo wir sind. Das heißt, wir haben eigentlich die Wanze in der Hosentasche immer mit uns.
With the advent of the smartphone, we have become even more visible.
So I would always call this a spy phone. And it's not just iPhones that are spy phones. I mean, most smartphones are these days.
Smartphones capture our communication behavior. How long, when, where, and with whom we talk. Apps collect data about our user behavior, even our health data. In addition, many people use digital data storage like clouds, carelessly handing over their information.
All of our communications are being intercepted, collected, analyzed, and stored automatically. And that means that all of our ideas, all of our thoughts, all of our expressions, all of our associations, who we talk to, who we meet, who we love, who we hate.
As the old internet saying goes, if it's for free, then you are the product. Because the use of all those convenient digital online services are only seemingly for free. Because we pay with our data. We have neither insight nor overview about our digital self, and absolutely no possibility to actively control it.
Wenn ich Pizza bestelle online, das ist sehr bequem, wenn die Daten halt wirklich auch nur fürs Pizza-Bestellen verwendet würden. Aber das Problem ist, das ist nicht so, denn diese Daten haben über das Pizza-Bestellen hinaus einen riesigen wirtschaftlichen Wert. Und genau dieser wirtschaftliche Wert ist es, der zu großen Kapitalakkumulationen führt bei den Internetgiganten. Das Problem ist, dass es Firmen gibt, die zum Geschäftsmodell das sogenannte Data Brokerage haben. Das heißt, ganz konkret, wenn Sie etwas bestellen, dann hören 40 andere Firmen mit. Beispielsweise über Beacons. Das heißt, da laufen entsprechende Prozesse im Hintergrund Ihres Browsers mit, die jeden Tastendruck, den Sie veranlassen und verursachen auf Ihrem Weg zum Kauf, aufzeichnen und das zur späteren Auswertung erstmal irgendwo abspeichern. So. Und beispielsweise wird aufgezeichnet, wie oft Sie beim Ausfüllen von Online-Kreditanträgen die Löschtaste benutzen. Wenn Sie häufig die Löschtaste benutzen, kann man daraus Rückschlüsse ziehen, dass Sie vielleicht nicht besonders gebildet sind. Das macht ein Algorithmus, ein Berechnungsverfahren. Und weil eben diese Rückschlüsse gezogen werden, automatisch erhalten Sie keinen Kreditpunkt aus.
The data we create assembling our digital self is also of interest as a juicy source of information for the intelligence community.
So equipment is now being placed on U.S. networks, infrastructure, electronic infrastructure, tapping straight in, enabled by critical partnerships, the full extent of which have still not been revealed to this day, not even from the Snowden disclosures, AT&T, Verizon, and a number of others. But that's where it started. It was with the phone companies, okay? It was rapidly expanded to include emails and all related information, internet usage and all related information, and financial transactions.
The revelations by Edward Snowden provide detailed insight into the relationship between intelligence services and private companies. Telephone metadata and web browsing histories are of great interest to the intelligence community.
See, that's really industrial relations. They were tapping the fiber lines between the Google servers, yeah. They didn't even know this was going on. Google did not. Okay, so, I mean, that's the point. They can tap lines anywhere in the world. And when they do that, they can get it between the servers of any company.
From my perspective, I think there's been massive collusion between the big internet corporations and big government, you know, with the big spy agencies, the military security complex.
They have agreements between them where they will pay money for data if they produce data for NSA, or they will also pay for access and, like, for example, the room in the AT&T facility in San Francisco that has the NSA. It's the NSA room that has the tap and all and how they feed data in. And it's really AT&T that has to maintain that room.
Facebook is evil, in my view. I've been saying this for years. It's the spy's wet dream. We offer up our information, and it's just there on a plate for the spies to access. And we know they do, through back doors and things. And yet that sort of information used to take them weeks or months to gather on an individual.
The extent of information that Google has is nothing near what NSA does. For example, they have access to the emails if they're using Gmail, for example, but not all the other service providers. And they don't have that data to do a composite view of what people are doing. Nor do they have access to all the fiber optic lines around the world, nor do they see the banking transactions or the financial transactions or the phone calls. They don't see that. So there's a vast amount of information that Google does not have.
So that's something that is leading to increasing concentrations of power, and you get some smart people with these new companies, and then these connect to the national security sector as contractors. So the creative vibrancy in market capitalism is what I'm concerned about.
Many of the companies concerned reacted immediately to the Snowden revelations. They proclaim and advertise seemingly tap-proof mobile phones and texting services, followed by public announcements pleading that they will no longer put up with the pressure of the intelligence services.
The way in which the technology companies have reacted in the wake of the Snowden leaks means that the level of cooperation between technology companies and intelligence agencies has gone down, and that's added to the threat in some ways. It would be slightly bizarre if all the advances in technology and the use of bulk data analysis, which are improving the performance of business, improving the healthcare delivery and so on, somehow national security weren't allowed to use it. It's not as if the more security you get, the less privacy you have, or the more privacy you have, the less security you have. These, in a free society like we enjoy in the West, your freedoms are guaranteed by security. And so the job of Western governments is to find the optimum levels of privacy and security so both are maximized.
As a consequence of the September 11th attacks, the technical capabilities of the intelligence services were massively expanded. International collaboration of national spy organizations was also intensified, not always without friction and problems. They have similar aims, like combating international terrorism, but yet they listen in on one another.
After when 9/11 hit, there was this perspective that Germany had screwed up, that the security services screwed up, that they had harbored terrorists, right? You know, you have the cells in Hamburg, you have a number of the hijackers that transited through, lived there, planned there. It was a significant cell, there's no question about that, and there's a whole history behind it. And I think as I said this even publicly. I've said this in terms of the testimony for the Bundestag. That Germany within Europe was declared target number one, and I believe significant pressure, but clearly out of the secret partnership and cooperation with the BND and others, was expanded. And we know that now that, again, more evidence has come out. There was a special agreement, this secret and an expanded sharing agreement, basically gave the United States carte blanche, but also it was, hey, BND, you know, not only going to cooperate, you're going to help facilitate.
In the spring 2015, a scandal erupts in Germany regarding the close and secret collaboration between the German intelligence service BND and the NSA. The BND cooperated with the NSA to spy on European politicians and assisted the United States in attempts of industrial espionage. When the press reported that the Chancellery had known about the scandal since 2008, it peaked with the German opposition threatening to sue its own government over the BND-NSA affair.
Also ich glaube, dass dieses Wegducken nach allem, was uns jetzt bekannt ist, nicht richtig war. Allerdings mag es schon sein, dass die deutschen Geheimdienste in einer so großen Abhängigkeit stehen und in einem so hohen Maße involviert waren von all diesen in diese Aktivitäten, dass gewissermaßen eine richtige Opposition am Ende unglaubwürdig gewesen wäre, weil dann hätte möglicherweise die amerikanische Seite mal aufgedeckt, in welchem Umfang deutsche Geheimdienstler mit diesen Vorgängen vertraut waren.
Since 2014, an inquiry into the Snowden revelations meets in the Bundestag. For the first time, a whistleblower from the USA reports to the Parliamentary Committee about the NSA and its interrelations with the German BND. William Binney confirmed the very close relationship between the BND and the NSA to the Commission, a relationship that already existed during his time in the U.S. intelligence service.
Also ich bin wirklich weit davon entfernt, dass ich da uns nur auf die Schulter klopfe und sage, ja, was in den USA passiert, das kann in Deutschland sich nicht ereignen. Wir sind da auf jeden Fall besser, aber ich habe schon den Eindruck, dass wir gerade auch aufgrund des Instruments der parlamentarischen Kontrolle der Nachrichtendienste eine gute Möglichkeit haben, intern auch für Mitarbeiter der Nachrichtendienste, für den Fall, dass sie der Auffassung sind, dass sie zu rechtswidrigem Verhalten angehalten werden, dass sich Straftaten in einem Nachrichtendienst ereignen, die nicht an die Öffentlichkeit geraten, sich an das dafür zuständige parlamentarische Kontrollgremium zu wenden.
From what I can see, they have the same problem of getting information from the BND that the Congress has of getting information from the NSA. That is, they either won't tell them or they lie to them, one or the other. I mean, that's what's been going on in the U.S. government. The point is that in our case, the Snowden material has made it obvious that they've been lying to the government.
That's what intelligence agencies are. They are tasked to do things in secret that are unlawful or politically embarrassing.
You see, intelligence agencies aren't controllable unless they're really heavily monitored, and there's a verification, an unquestionable verification process. They don't have that now. That's the problem in our country, too. We do not have an unequivocal verification process that the agencies can corrupt.
Wir haben, glaube ich, ein gutes System, in dem unsere Nachrichtendienste des Bundes der parlamentarischen Kontrolle unterliegen. Es gibt dazu ein eigenes Gremium, das sogenannte Parlamentarische Kontrollgremium, dem insgesamt 8 Bundestagsabgeordnete angehören.
I mean, all governments seem to be in a position of having to trust their intelligence agencies telling them the truth. And that is questionable.
Nothing will happen in terms of any self-regulation. Those organizations are too secretive, too complex, and are too well connected to the powers that are meant to regulate them.
The German Chancellery and the Bundestag Parliamentary Control Committee are officially responsible for the control of the BND. Only with a more comprehensive and effective control of the intelligence agencies can civil rights and privacy be properly protected. What other options are there to prevent abuse or possible illegal activities by the spies? Often only intelligence insiders are left to go public, reveal institutional violations and become whistleblowers. Yet there's disparity between these individuals on the one side and the governments and intelligence services on the other. And so the whistleblowers and activists soon find out what happens when they challenge these organizations.
Sowohl Konzerne wie Staaten reagieren natürlich umso heftiger, umso mehr es ans Eingemachte geht. Deswegen waren die Reaktionen nicht nur gegenüber dem Whistleblower Snowden sehr heftig, sondern ja auch gegenüber allen Staaten, die Anstalten machten, sich ernsthaft zur Wehr zu setzen. Die einfachste Form der Reaktion wäre ja gewesen, Snowden zum Beispiel Asyl zu erteilen. Das hat kein westlicher Staat sich zu tun getraut, weil klar war, dass das dann mit massiven Sanktionen verbunden gewesen wäre.
After his revelations in 2013, Edward Snowden tried to flee from Hong Kong to South America via Moscow, but the US revoked his passport. He couldn't continue his journey from Moscow and had to apply for asylum in Russia.
Snowden had been criticized about ending up in Russia. He ended up in Russia because the State Department cancelled his passport, and so he couldn't fly out of Russia. I mean, it's an incredible own goal.
Why would they do that? That allows them to make the argument that he's working for Russia. And they can apply the 1917 Act. Why would they want to apply the 1917? Because the 1917 Act carries with it the death penalty. And they want to give him the death penalty.
The NSA Commission in the Bundestag actually wanted to call Snowden as a witness. Many voices in the German public support the idea to grant Edward Snowden asylum in Germany.
Persönlich bin ich der Überzeugung, dass es keinen Gesichtspunkt gibt, unter dem Edward Snowden berechtigt Asyl in Deutschland bekommen könnte. Man muss politisch verfolgt sein, man muss an Leib und Leben bedroht sein, man muss aufgrund seiner Religion oder aufgrund anderer Dinge verfolgt sein und alles das trifft auf Edward Snowden nicht zu. Aber man muss nun mal sehen, wir befinden uns hier natürlich auch in völkerrechtlichen Verpflichtungen. Es gibt ein Auslieferungsersuchen der US-Amerikaner gegenüber Deutschland. Also für den Fall, dass Edward Snowden nach Deutschland käme, müsste er zunächst mal kurzzeitig in Haft genommen werden, um zu prüfen, ob er aufgrund des Auslieferungsersuchens der US-Amerikaner an diese zu überstellen ist. Deswegen ist meine Empfehlung an Edward Snowden, gut gemeint, nicht nach Deutschland zu kommen.
Im Falle Assange, wenn man WikiLeaks jetzt mal als Hintergrund nimmt, war es anders. Dort hat die USA sich als Ganze aus verständlichen Gründen herausgefordert gefühlt, weil sie ihr gesamtes Geheimhaltungssystem in Frage gestellt sah, sich auch bloßgestellt sah gegenüber der Öffentlichkeit, die ganzen diplomatischen Depeschen, die auf einmal nachlesbar waren im Internet.
WikiLeaks is now an organization that is in conflict with the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, the GCHQ, etc. An organization that is well known to these agencies and an organization that they want to wrong foot.
Ich glaube, da ist keine Frage, dass 2010, spätestens Ende 2010, als die Diplomatic Cables rauskamen, bei den Amerikanern echt eine Sicherung durchgebrannt ist. Die haben alles akzeptiert, aber als es mit den Cables kam, da war einfach Ende Gelände. Ja? Da waren die sowas von abgepickt, dass die wahrscheinlich wirklich Himmel und Hölle in Bewegung gesetzt haben, um das zu stoppen.
The US plot against Julian Assange came to light in 2011 as part of the so-called Stratfor hacks. Stratfor is a Texas-based consulting company developing geostrategical strategies for the US government. Jeremy Hammond, the hacker, who copied a total of 5 million emails from the Stratfor server, was sentenced to 10 years in prison at the end of 2013. Hammond's data theft included controversial messages by the vice president of Stratfor to the US government. They contained a multi-stage strategy proposal of how to deal with Assange. 2 weeks after the hacker attack, the accusations of rape surfaced in Sweden.
Wir wissen aus den Stratford-Papieren, dass natürlich Rufschädigung und Diskreditierung und so durchaus für die ein Mittel ist, um sozusagen ihre Gegner klein zu halten. Und viele dieser Propagandastrategien, die ich gesehen habe gegen Julian, sind sicherlich nicht aus Überzeugung geführt worden. Also nicht aus Überzeugung, dass der tatsächlich Julian irgendwelchen Dreck am Stecken hat, sondern da ging es wirklich nur darum, ihn klein zu halten. Weil jeder, der die Geschichte, die in Schweden passiert ist, ein bisschen besser kennt, weiß, dass das alles ganz anders gelaufen ist, als in den Medien dargestellt wird.
Assange traveled to Sweden in 2010 for a series of lectures. There, investigation proceedings into sexual misdemeanors against 2 Swedish women were opened. Assange said he was being subjected to a smear campaign and refuted the allegations. When Interpol issued an arrest warrant for him, he went underground.
Within 24 hours, it had been dropped. It had been assessed by the most senior prosecutor in Stockholm, Eva Binney, and dropped. And she said that there was no crime at all that it had been committed. So later on it came out in the Supreme Court here that both women concerned had not filed a complaint, and that one of them had said that the police had made this up.
After a brief game of hide and seek, Assange handed himself in to the London police in December 2010 and was remanded in custody. Released on bail, but with an electronic ankle monitor, Assange fought in court against his extradition to Sweden on a number of occasions.
The walls were closing in, both from the US side, the US was clearly ready, and from the Swedish side and from the UK. At the time, in June 2012, I had a lot of surveillance, and also GCHQ, as it later came out, was spying on us and the National Security Agency on me personally. So there was a risk when coming to the embassy to apply for asylum that action would be seen and that I would be interdicted. But I was extremely well disguised. Well, I didn't look anything like I normally look.
Is it true that, I heard something of wig and stone in the shoe? Is that true?
The stone in the shoe is correct, yes.
And the wig and the clothing?
Everything was different. The reason you put a stone in your shoe is to change your gait, because the gait can be quite recognizable, and that's not an issue if someone's just seen you in the newspaper, but it is an issue for a surveillance team.
Since June 2012, Assange has been stranded at the Ecuadorian embassy in London.
At that time, I said, well, I'd be happy to go to Sweden, provided there's a guarantee of no extradition to the United States. Because the London Independent had already revealed that the US and Sweden were in informal talks about extraditing me from Sweden.
It'd be rendered, yeah. We'd call that rendering. You know, that's what one of the dark side activities that we've been doing. Taking people off the street anywhere in the world and sending them to different places for torture or imprisonment or whatever.
Es gibt diesen schönen Spruch, alle lieben den Verrat, aber keiner liebt den Verräter. Ich glaube, das zeigt sich eben in diesen Snowden-Geschichten und das zeigt sich auch an Julian oder besonders an Julian ganz, ganz deutlich. Am Anfang war die Begeisterung für WikiLeaks und Julian unglaublich groß. Also wir haben ja als Holland-Stiftung sammeln wir seit 2009 für WikiLeaks Spenden. Das war also noch lange bevor das 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗁-Video erschienen ist. Wir haben sozusagen die ganze Zeit begleitet. Wir haben in 2010 allein ungefähr 1,5 Millionen € Spendengelder für WikiLeaks eingenommen. Ich kann dir heute sagen, das sind keine 20.000 mehr im Jahr.
You know, once the story's over, the journalists skip off and break news stories. They've made their careers, and the whistleblower is left high and dry, having broken their careers, with no hope of proper employment again. You know, having left behind your whole way of life, your social circle, everything. And in the case of intelligence whistleblowers, of course, you face automatic prosecution and conviction too. So it's a very high price to pay.
Well, I mean, a real threat came when the FBI came into my house, and when I was getting out of the shower and pointed a pistol at me. So I was getting out of the shower, getting dried off, and they came in pointing a pistol at me, and also my family. So it was a threatening. It was how to threaten people. And then after that, the Department of Justice attempted to fabricate evidence and indict us.
I was very publicly indicted with a 10 felony. It was a 10 felony count indictment under the Espionage Act, facing 35 years in prison. That was the final price.
You've got to remember that inside the intelligence community, they're trumpeting these things. They're holding these guys up as examples to say, look, if you say what's going on, if you step out of line, even if you're doing it for the right reasons, even if you're doing it the right way, there will be repercussions. You know, they talk about internal channels and whatnot, but these guys used internal channels. And they people like Thomas Drake, they ended up getting indicted. And this is something that I paid very close attention to and I learned a great deal from.
It was very rare in American history to get charged with espionage for non-spy activities. In fact, I was actually only the second whistleblower charged in like manner. The first was Daniel Ellsberg.
When he went to the Baltimore Sun, he did not reveal classified information. Now, they charged him with classified, but that was a hoax. See, that was a fraud. They reclassified material that they found in his computer, which was not classified. And he had every reason to believe that he would not be prosecuted for what he gave to Baltimore Sun. He would lose his job. He would lose his clearance. This is very serious. His jobs depended on clearance. In fact, most of the jobs he should have now would require a clearance. So he was taking a very serious risk. But I doubt if he thought he would be prosecuted. I doubt it.
I was blacklisted. I was persona non grata. I was radioactive. No government agency would take me, nor any contractor with the government. It was off limits. And NSA made it crystal clear, even though there were attempts by even prior to my indictment to find work, they would all come to naught. So I ended up as a wage rate employee at Apple, one of their retail stores in the greater DC area, where I still work. Been unable to find any other work at all, of any kind. That was the price. You have no job, you have no career, you have no pension. All those years I served in the government. I'm now a traitor and an enemy of the state.
The price Thomas Drake and other whistleblowers pay for warning against the danger of a surveillance state is high. Loss of friends and family. Flight into exile or long prison sentences under more stringent conditions. Professional isolation and personal financial collapse.
So similar. This is so weird. It so mirrors you become very efficient. Everything is organized. Everything is, you're just like, wow.
That's how far we go in our efficiency to erase the sovereignty of individuals. I see how far an institution would go to erase freedom from a person's life. And the only way they can do that is to control them every single second of the day and measure it at the same time. Wow. I chose to put myself inside that system. Never imagining when I did that I'd be charged with espionage. For having defended the Constitution. Protecting the Constitution became a state crime. Okay? A state crime. And we have the power. You don't. In the end, all they had left to do was assassinate me. At the character level, that's all they had left. Assassinate me. Which is the ultimate form of control, right? It doesn't matter what even the crimes against the state were. You're unacceptable. You're not fit to work in the government or be a citizen. Yeah, you deserve prison. Because you're the wrong kind. Where have we had that in history?
Let's go outside.
You just described how the FBI team interrogated me in a similar room.
Yeah.
And they played the good cop, bad cop with themselves, and they brought the chief prosecutor in. He threatened me with spending the rest of my life in prison unless I cooperated with their investigation. And he said, you better start talking. And I simply said, I'm not going to plead bargain with the truth. He says, we have more than enough evidence to put you away for a long, long time. I was declared an enemy of the state. I committed crimes against the state.
Yeah.
But I'm standing here free, and I can't begin to tell you what it means, because I'm okay. Right? So I'm thanking you for holding up the mirror to my own government. Okay, all right, because I'm free. I did not end up in the dark hole. Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm glad the West won in that regard, and yet how paradoxical it is that the technology of the West is now being used to do mass surveillance on a scale that Stasi never could have imagined. I don't need one agent to 180, quote-unquote, East German citizens. The computer takes care of it for me. That's the real machine. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier, too. I've publicly called for the dissolution of NSA. You can't reform it. There is no reform possible. The last thing left, which is true, is to cut funding.
The problem is they weren't smart enough to understand what they were creating. What they in fact were creating was a master Stasi network. I mean, this is like the Stasi on super steroids. The Stasi had all this data on a lot of people, but it was all handwritten in paper on files and so on. Very difficult to manipulate, also hard to keep up to date and hard to keep complete. None of that is a problem anymore, especially with this electronic acquisition of information. That makes it really simple. So I refer to this as the Stasi on super steroids. You know, and this is an NSA I now refer to as the new Stasi agency.
Time after time after time, mass surveillance has come up wanting. It has been unable to prevent some of the most significant terrorist incidents of our day. It never prevented the Boston Marathon bombing. It certainly didn't prevent the latest, the Charlie Hebdo massacre in Paris. Why is that?
I call these things data bulk failures. Simply because when you have X key score and you send your people in to look at all this bulk data, they're just inundated with information. They can't get through it.
Ja, ich widerspreche der These, dass die Erfolgsquote der Vorratsdatenspeicherung gleich null ist. Und ich glaube, es wäre perfide, die Sinnhaftigkeit der Vorratsdatenspeicherung jetzt daran zu bemessen, ob die schrecklichen Anschläge in Paris dadurch vermieden wurden oder nicht. Sie sind es nicht, aber die Aufklärung jetzt der barbarischen Straftaten, die Aufklärung dessen, ob es sich hier um Einzeltäter handelte oder um ein größeres Netzwerk, ist nun mal wesentlich effektiver, schneller und vielleicht sogar erst recht nur dann möglich, wenn man auf die Verbindungsdaten zugreift.
With the next big evolutionary step, we will face the expansion of the so-called Internet of Things. Watches, fridges, but also our clothing will be equipped with internet connections to produce ever-increasing and ever more precise data about us. Through automation, artificial intelligence and ever-perfected algorithms, machines will soon be able to predict our behavior. But what happens to a society that is consciously aware of being permanently observed, where every step, every action leaves a trail? Our lives in a surveillance society will be reduced to simmering in a convenience hell. Conformist behavior, self-censorship, and mere consumerism, labeled as freedom of choice.
Das könnte dazu führen, dass am Ende ich damit rechnen muss, dass meine gesamte Person gewissermaßen öffentlich wird. Und auch diejenigen, die sich nicht zu Schulden kommen lassen, das ist ja so eine naive Reaktion, ich lasse mir nicht zu Schulden kommen, dann ist es ja egal, werden dann lernen, dass sie dadurch manipulierbar werden, weil die wenigsten haben dann die Kraft, sich gegen negative Urteile durchzusetzen und ihr eigenes Ding zu machen.
The only guarantee we can have our own privacy, our own security, is to take it into our own hands. We can't trust the corporations, we cannot trust our governments, and we certainly cannot trust the spy agencies to respect our privacy and respect the law.
So that's the reason to be hopeful. Small organisation of very committed people, when even faced by a giant intelligence bureaucracy like the National Security Agency, like the CIA in an earlier case, and the Pentagon, DOJ, State Department, etc., can survive and even thrive. Okay, can get a bloody nose doing it, but still stand up.
I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you what to believe in, you know? And it's okay if you hate me. It's okay if you disagree with me. It's okay for everybody, you know, to look at this, because we have to decide how we feel, right? We got to stop thinking that what's on the news is the gospel truth. What an official says behind the podium is exactly the right answer, or what I say is something that should be relied on. I could be totally full of You've got to figure out what you believe in and stand for it. You have to stand for it, you know? And whether I'm a good guy, whether I'm a bad guy, whether I'm a hero, whether I'm a traitor, none of that matters. Criticize me, hate me, but think about what matters in the issues, right? Think about the world you want to live in, and then be a part of building that.